I'm Anna. Welcome to my channel. So happy to see you. Today, I'm making some bell bottoms or flares, whatever you like to call them, with this really cool insert. I was inspired by something I saw on Pinterest, which I so often am, and thought I'd give it a go and see if I could come up with something similar myself. Come along, I'll show you how I did it. All right, so these are the jeans I'm using today. I chose these because they fit really well. They're comfortable, but it's a snug fit. In other words, it's not a wide leg jean. It's snug down to the knee at least. That's what you want to help accentuate the flares more. And then I don't know if they're considered a skinny jean or a straight leg. They're quite narrow at the bottom, but we're going to remedy that shortly. These are a dark color. I did have some lighter ones I wanted to use, but they were too wide in the leg. So just that's how I made the decision on which ones to go with. So then I've also got some contrasting denim over here. I'm not sure yet what I want to use for the insert. I know I want it to be different than this. So I've got a couple different shades I can experiment with. So then I was also scouring through a lot of different ideas I found on Pinterest that I really liked. They use all different kinds of things to embellish the jeans, but one of them had pockets that they used, kind of turned upside down on them. And I'm going to try and experiment with that. I really like these because that's a lovely embellishment on there. Plus the jeans themselves have different colors in them. It's hard to tell from here, but there was actually pinks in the jean itself. I think you can see it a little better on this side. There's a little bit of pink here and there, but I just like the contrast and the shape of that embellishment. So I'm going to see if I can't use those in there. Might use pieces of waistband or belt loops. I'm really not sure yet. We'll figure it out as we go. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I want to pick the hem apart on these jeans. I'm just going to open it up. I wouldn't mind them being about an inch longer, and I kind of like that effect on there, so I'm hoping it'll look really cool and maybe even fray a little once I pick it out. But you could leave it if you're happy with your length. If they're too long, you could just cut it off if you prefer. If they're too short, we can always add to it. We'll deal with that later, but for me, I'm just going to pick that open right now. Okay, so there it is. I've picked it all out, and I also gave it a quick press just to get that to lay a little bit flatter. I really like the look of that, the detail that adds to that, so I'm happy about that. You will still get a bit of fraying because these have a lot of elastane in them. It's not going to be fraying the same as normal jeans, but that's all right. Probably at the end we'll run a zigzag stitch around there to prevent any excessive fraying anyway, but we'll worry about that later. So I tried them on. I'm quite happy with the length. If you want yours shorter or longer, bear in mind the length they feel on you right now, it's going to be a bit different once they're wider. I like my bells to be long, to nearly hit the floor. But you decide if you want them shorter, now's the time to trim that. If, however, you want them longer, then we can always attach additional fabric to this. We could say cut some off another pair of jeans, whether or not you pick that open, and just attach it. I would probably lay it underneath there and just run a stitch along the top of it, like a zigzag with gold thread. But, you know, and that would give you extra length if you want it. You don't have to do it now, but I would decide now if you're going to, because it might affect the placement of this. This mark, when I tried them on, that falls just below my knee. And at the original hem length, that would have been 17 inches. But because I've let them out another inch, for me, that's about 18 inches. So I've just made a little chalk mark here right at the 18-inch mark on the outside seam. I'm going to do that on this leg as well. So now I'm just going to open up the outside leg seam up to that mark. I'm going to pick it like I did on the bottom. If you don't want to do that, you certainly could cut it. If you decide to just cut, I probably would cut maybe a 1/4 inch inside that seam so that when you're attaching your pieces, you don't have to sew right directly on that seam. But you know, you do whatever works for you. I'm going to pick it apart. Okay. So I've got those two ripped open, as you can see, on the outside of each leg. What I found easiest actually was to work from the inside. On either side of the serger thread, there's a straight line of seams. That's the actual seam allowance. And then of course they've serged the edges. So I found from the inside, just picking that and then pulling it, it came out really pretty quick. And then I just had to run through and break up the serger threads as well. But I didn't want to go any higher than my mark, which of course I couldn't see working from the inside. So I put a pin in it. right where that mark was, so that as I was working inside, I would see that pin and not go any further. So that's what I suggest if you're going to pick yours apart. Now the next thing is to make a template for the triangular piece that we're going to insert in here. So we know how big it's going to be and how much space we've got to embellish it in that. What I did, because I've got 18 inches, I wanted to give myself extra because it can be tricky working in the point up there, and I want to have a lot of excess up there. So instead of 18, I want mine to be 19. So I've got an extra inch up at the top there. And then when these, before I cut them, were about 7.25 inches laying flat. So measured laying flat. And I want to have the piece that I insert, remember, I want to put one of these pockets on, kind of upside down like that. So I want to have room on either side of this. I'm going to cut this pocket out probably with a good 1/4 inch on each side of it so that I can sew through that rather than through the pocket, the extra thickness there. And then I want to give myself a little excess just to be sure. So I was thinking, oh, you know, if I went even an inch just to be sure, I can always cut off any I don't need. That makes it about 7.5 or 8 inches wide minimum at the bottom. And as it happens, from the last time I made a pair of bell bottoms, I already had my pattern for that, and it just happens to be 19 by 8. So I'm going to use that for my template. I just took a grocery bag, a paper bag. You could use wrapping paper or really anything. And I measured it out initially so it was the width I wanted, 8 inches in this case. And then if you fold it in half, that'll give you where the point should be at the top. And then you can just draw your lines and cut out your triangle. So from here, the next phase is we're going to start working with these extra fabrics that I've got and trying to, figure out which one I want to use, cutting out the triangle and putting on embellishments. But I want to say, while these are cut open, before we attach anything, now's the time if you want to add any other embellishments. Only because it'll be so much easier while this leg is open and that extra material isn't in there. So say if you wanted to add patches or any other embellishments on these, you can get in there easily right now while that's open. So decide if you want to do that. Okay, I've cut out some of my pieces and did some comparisons. I like how it looks better with the medium color denim, so I'm not using that lighter one I had earlier. I've already cut these legs off. And since we had picked out the bottom hem on the jeans that we're working with, I thought it would do the same on these. It's actually kind of a cooler effect. Since it's lighter denim, you get more variation in the colors. I've also cut out some extra bits to work with as I assemble these. And then from that same pair of jeans, these two bigger pieces here are part of the waistband. So for that, I essentially just took the waistband from a pair of jeans. These were from the same pair that those pockets came from. And if you kind of look on this one, now these are Levi's. On this one, if you open up the waistband on the edge here, you can see that there's a thick seam on one side, but it's just folded on the other side. There's still some stitches you have to pull out. But what that means is that one waistband piece will just have a nice crease in the middle adding to the effect, but they'll stay together because it's just folded. And that was the case with these jeans as well. You can see there was a stitch line in the middle. This pair, however, they were actually two pieces. So when you pull out all the stitches, you get two separate pieces. So depending on the jeans you're working with, you might have wider pieces like these or narrower pieces. Also from the same jeans that these pockets came from, they had this little small pocket. Now that was inset inside the front pocket, which they occasionally do, like a little key fob pocket or something. And they come in different shapes. Often they're a bit wider and shallower. I liked this little one, so I may or may not find somewhere to put that on them. And I've got some other embellishments just to have a play with. Lastly, the jeans that I got those pockets from, I've used them for other things. So there's not much left of them, as you can see here. But I really like the variation in color there, so I might add some patches to the jeans before I sew them back together. We'll have a look. I'm not sure yet. We'll see what looks good. Okay, so I've got one of the legs turned inside out here, and I've just made a small mark exactly where the center is from both sides. I've done that on my pattern piece as well, just so I can kind of make sure I'm relatively in the center. Now the reason is, the piece that I've got is actually not much more than the width of that, so I'm actually going to leave it just that wide, and I might slightly adjust my my marks so I don't have to cut that little bit off. We'll see. That'll be in the seam allowance anyway if it's a little rough there. So the first thing I'm going to do, just so it doesn't shift on me, is pin my pattern piece in. Just in a couple places. Okay, so my pattern is actually 19 inches from top to bottom, which is an inch more than the opening in the jeans, so I'm plenty covered there. But again, I want to use the full width to the bottom here since I've only got a little bit extra from there. So I'm going to try to get that to go. I'm just going to use the ruler to mark it rather than going right up against the edge. You certainly could mark it on the edge and then just go around it, say with something like this, and just mark an additional ½ inch out, and maybe you know, if you want to add a ½ inch all the way around. I really just want to take advantage of the bottom there. So I'm just going to draw it and go right up to the point. Might have to slide my ruler just a bit. And I'll do the same on the other side. Okay, so I've got that line now on both sides. I'll go ahead and pull that off, and we'll cut this out right on the lines. So there's our first insert. We'll just do the same thing with the other leg. Okay, I've just been having a play to kind of get an idea of what design I like, and I think this is what I'm going to go with. I really like this. I've already pinned this one in place, but just because I'm going to go in now and stitch these down, I want to bear them in mind the order that I'm going to do that, so I've pinned accordingly. So in other words, this one's the furthest down. It's got something overlapping it on top and bottom, and then this overlaps this one. So I'm going to want to stitch this one down first. So I've just run the pins kind of lengthwise here so that they'll stay in, because I'm going to try and stitch. I'm going to use a gold thread as close as I can match to the color on this pocket, which has already got some stitching on it. And I'm going to run it right where the original stitching was, where I pulled it out. So you can see I'm going to probably run one there, just a straight stitch line on each of these, that one there, the two sides of the inner one, and there. And then, so I'll have to lift this out of the way a little bit to do that. And then I can go back and do the same thing and stitch here and here, here, and on either side of this one. And then across the bottom one, of course, pulling this pocket out of the way first. And so the pocket will get stitched on last. But I'll leave it pinned in place. I can easily, as you can see, I've just put the pins down here so I can easily lift that out of the way. And then I had considered running a zigzag stitch, but I don't have in some spots a lot of fabric on the side of that pocket. And also there's so much stitching on here already with the decorative stuff that I think I'll just stay with a straight stitch for everything. There's not going to be much that can fray there anyway. So I think that's how I'll go. So let me just get this one pinned and then we'll go stitch. Okay, so I'll just fold these two back out of the way and start with this one. Again, just stitching in the original stitch line. I'm just running a straight stitch. I am using a denim needle, by the way. So a jeans needle is definitely recommended. So I've got all the strips on. I'm going to do the pocket now, and just be a little careful in this area because even though I'm not sewing directly on the pocket itself, I'm going on the outside here, it is overlapping other seams in that. So just might get, if it gets a little tough, just go slower and use your hand crank if you need to. All right, that looks pretty good. Now I'm just going to cut off any excess bit now that hangs over outside the edge of the triangle. It's like out here. So that's one insert done. Now I'm just going to repeat all of that on the other one. Okay, so I've got both triangle inserts done. I just wanted to stop and let you know, I did end up switching presser foots on this because I was struggling a little bit with the standard presser foot on there because if you have a lot of fabric, like if you left a good, I don't know, 3/4 inch or so around your pocket, then you probably would be all right because you could stitch further away from that pocket as you go around. But in my case, especially in some spots, I didn't have quite that much. And so to get on the fabric where I wanted to stitch, the presser foot would have to tilt and actually ride along the pocket. And sometimes that caused problems. So to get around that, I switched to my zipper foot, which lets you get right up next to it. It actually made it much easier. I could just ride right along the edge of that pocket and keep my needle in the center position so it's stitched right alongside of it. And then just to make double sure, I went around it twice, back stitching every now and then just to make it nice and secure. So I just thought I'd let you know, if you're having any trouble with the standard foot getting too close to the edge of that pocket for where you want to sew, switch to your zipper foot. Most machines come with one. So now I've explored two different ways of attaching the panels to see what I like best. Earlier I did mention that I had decided to pick open the seams because I wanted that sort of edge to show, that sort of slightly frayed edge, and I was going to leave it open like this. So I've pinned one that way just to have a look at that. And this other leg I've pinned the traditional way, which is putting the two edges together from the inside and pinning it so that the seams are on the inside. So there's pros and cons to both. If you like the look of that and you want that little frayed edge in there, then you probably want to go this way. This is more difficult to pin. It's also more difficult to sew. But if that's the end result and look that you want, then you could go that way. And I'll show you how to do that. The other option, which I've since decided I like better now, is to leave the seams on the inside. It is much easier to pin and much easier to sew. But also when I looked at it now, I kind of preferred the look of it without that frayed edge showing here. I'm still going to get a little bit of fraying from the pocket edge and of course at the bottom. But there's so much else going on in here. For me, I kind of think that's enough. The other thing I was debating is whether or not to add other embellishments. So you can see I've got this little pocket up here. I've sort of pinned it where I want it. I had the jeans tried on at the time, and that's kind of where I would want it to sit if I do decide to put it on. But I'm still undecided. As I said, I do have some of this denim left that's from the same jeans these pockets came from, and I like that effect. But no matter how I sort of fold it and decide how small or large a patch I would like and where I would put it, I just feel like it takes the focus away from what's happening down here, where there's so much going on now with all these different waistbands and pockets, and I really like how that looks, and I don't want to draw the eye away from it. So for me personally, I'm not going to put any other patches on. You certainly could, and again, it'll be easier if you do that, especially if they're going to be down lower on the lower half somewhere. It'll be easier to do that before you pin everything together. If you're going further up, you can get your sewing machine in from the top and it won't really matter. I'm still undecided about that. Let me know what you think. Should I or shouldn't I add that? I could always do it at any time. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and get these attached. So again, if you're deciding to go this way, if you want that ruffled edge, that slightly raveled or frayed edge, I should say, out here, the challenge is pinning it without pinning through both layers. And to a degree, you could have a small bit of cardboard or something slid up in there to help you only pin through the one side. But all I did, you can sort of see because of, there's a difference in color there. There's the edge where the seam was originally hidden. I just used that to line up with the edge of my triangle and then put a pin in like that and just continued working my way up. Where it gets challenging is up here at the corner. Now, because those that seam is just only split up to this point, it gets a bit strange up in there. I did have to sort of work with it to get it to lay flat, and that's why I've got an extra pin going through that way. The other challenge would be sewing this. You'd want to put it in your machine from the bottom, obviously. You could do a straight stitch or you could do a zigzag, but you're going to want to work from here and continue sewing until you get up to that point. That's challenging because as you get further up the leg of the jean, it's harder to get it into the machine without getting the back in the way. Generally what I would do in that case is I just keep folding this back and out of my way as I go and curling it up and curling it up. You'll have the pins coming out as you sew, so you can curl the whole thing up and just keep rolling the pant leg up as you go up. So that's how I would normally do that. I have done some jeans that way. It is doable. but it's definitely more challenging. So you'd want to go all the way up until you get to this point, reinforce that a bit, and then pull it back out of your machine and start again at this side and do the same. Just go all the way up that way. So if that's the way you choose to do it, no worries. Again, I'm going to go with this route. So I'll just pull these out and repin this the other direction. Okay, so I've pulled out the pins from here. Because we're going to turn the pant like inside out to pin these, I do want to keep that spot marked, but I don't want to leave a pin in there that's going to poke me when I get to that spot. So I'm just going to replace that with a safety pin, just so I'll see that from the inside too, to know, and hopefully keep that together to stop that from coming open any further. Now we'll turn that pants inside out. Okay, so this is the side, this leg is inside out now. And what you're going to want to do is we want right sides together. So we'll flip that over and take this edge, right sides together, and put your bottom point together. So line the edges up and stick a pin in there and continue to do that all the way up this side. Okay, so I'm up to the top and there are some thicker bits here. That's all right. I'm just continuing to go. I'm almost to the point where I've stopped cutting the sides open there, where that split ends. So I'm going to go ahead, put another pin here, and up as far as I can with this little bit of the open edge here, right up into the farthest point that I can pin it. Now we'll return to the other side and do the same thing. Put the two right sides together and start pinning at the bottom again. If you started at the top, you might not know how much excess you need there. I'd rather leave extra, and I can always cut that off. And you might end up with these uneven when you get to the bottom because they do stretch a bit. So I'm going to start down here. And then the same thing as I get to that top. I'm going to pin it up as far as I can. And then just leave the excess tail hang out of that triangle. Right about there. There we go. Now we'll just take it in and sew up both sides. All right, so I did have this particular seam wanting to keep rolling back on me. So for a couple of reasons, I've decided to sew from this side rather than from that side. So I've pulled my pins around to the other side. But also I think that'll be easier when I get to the top here to see what I'm doing. If I'm on this side, I won't be able to see what the fabric underneath is doing. So I'm also going to pull out the safety pin that I have holding the top together. There we go. So that it's easier once I do get to the top to pull that and lay it flat and do whatever I need to do to stitch right up to kind of up where the seam picks up again, because I want to get that as much as possible, sew that in there. And then once we've done that on both sides and this is all well attached, we'll just clip off this little bit that's hanging off. So either way, the pins are on this side again, so I can really see what I'm doing once I get up here with the seam. Okay, so I've just got the points pressed firmly together. I'm going to try to keep this as smooth and flat as I can. It is a little challenging because the leg wants to bulk up and twist just because it gets bigger at the bottom, but also because of the items that we've got attached to that insert. So just try to keep it as smooth and flat as you can as you go. And I'm just going to do a straight stitch, and I'll go a couple of stitches and do a back stitch. And I'm going to try to, I'm just lining up with the outside edge of my presser foot, which is about a 3/8 inch seam. You could do a quarter, you could do a half, do whatever works for you. But I just find it easy to follow the presser foot edge here for me. And every now and then stop, check that it's smooth and flat again. And nothing's bunched up under there. Pulling out the pins as you go. See how it's bunching up here again? That's because it's getting narrower and more twisted as I come up to the top. We'll just keep readjusting it as we go. It's going to feel sometimes like you've got things bunched up, but that's because of those thick attachments on there. Now as we get closer to the triangle, the point of the triangle, again, I'm just making sure this part is laying as flat as can be because we don't want to get the other side involved in it. Almost up to that point. And I can feel the pin from the other side. I just want to be real careful I don't go over that. And so I can see that's the stitching where I pulled out 2. So I want to go at least to that point and then put in a few reinforcement stitches. I'm going to temporarily pull this other pin out from the other side. I don't want to go further than that line because I might be attaching something from the other side. Back stitch. Let's pull that out and have a look. Okay, so now we're just going to flip it over. And as much as you can, line those edges up again at the top. You want to get that to lay as smooth and flat as possible. Don't worry about any excess triangle sticking out, because remember, we're going to cut that off. But by the time we get down here, it'll be right along edges matching again anyway, so it doesn't matter what that's doing. You just want this top part as smooth and flat as possible. And we're going to start up here. See where the other seam is still there up until this point. That's as far as we ripped it off. I want to start just a tiny bit behind that, so there's no holes or open bits. Maybe like 1/8 of an inch even, because I am going to do a couple of back stitches. Again, keep your excess material out from under the way so it doesn't get sewn in, and keep this smooth and flat as possible. Pull out that top pin, forward and back. And now as we're coming away from that triangle point, just focus on keeping the edges even with the presser foot. Now I'm going to come up here and just check, as long as I leave enough that it clears where the sewing ends, I can trim the excess off of that point now. And I'm just going to leave a little bit past that. There you go. So I might just even this side out as well. Both sides. Now, just to make sure it's good and strong, I'm likely going to reinforce that by doing each seam a second time. Then we'll do the other leg. Okay, I just wanted to quick show you these before I put them on, just to show you, because the corners on the triangles is the struggling point for most people. I know from my own experience it has been, but also comments I've seen online. Getting these to turn out smooth and flat like that without any holes is a struggle. This method worked really, really well. So I just wanted to show you that again and just kind of reiterate what I did. As I was coming up to the regular seam where I hadn't picked it, so from here down is where I picked it to put the insert in, and here is where I hadn't. I wanted to be able to see that to make sure that was all smooth and flat as possible. And so I did my straight stitch right up to and just past where I had picked that out to make sure I covered that just a bit, and then back stitched. And then when I did do a second round of stitching, but it was a zigzag over the edge just to stop too much excessive fraying, because there is elastane in here. They're going to fray a bit, but that'll hopefully stop any excessive fraying, and gave it a second stitch as well. And with that one as well, I went up past where the join is here, that corner point, just maybe a 1/4 inch, and back down again with that zigzag. I'm really happy with the results. Again, because that is just about the best corner I've ever had turn out on these. And I've done a few of these now, so really good. I'm happy with that. There's River walking around. So what do you think? I love how those turned out. I'll give you a close-up view here, but just the detail in it, I'm really, really happy with it, and I didn't think it needed any other embellishments anywhere else. I know a lot of people like to put patches all over other places. I considered putting a pocket up on the top of the thigh or something else, just, you know, from the same jeans that those pockets came from. That smaller pocket I showed you earlier, I ended up deciding not to. After I played around with it, I just thought, you know, I really want the flair itself to be the star of the show with these. So I didn't do it. But you're free to do whatever you want, of course, if you like this idea. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you liked this video. If you do, give me a thumbs up, and I hope you'll subscribe.